Hey, what's up? Silas here. I'm in Westlands now. I'm about to go watch the Black Panther movie. I've talked about it in a couple of different videos. You might have seen those too. The first one was Black Panther is not for white people. That was way early, talking about how people were saying that this movie's finally a movie for black people. And then a week ago or so, Black Panther was finally released in the United States of America, and the identity politics came out as expected. So I'm just going to go watch it. I haven't seen any reviews. I've seen some ratings. People are saying the ratings are good, saying it's good. I expected this movie to be good from what I saw in the trailers. And yeah, so I'm going to watch it, give you a review after, and let you know what I think. Hey, what's up? So just finished watching Black Panther. Excellent movie. Definitely go watch it if you haven't seen it. I think it's definitely up there with Thor. I really enjoyed Thor. I really like this end credits thing that they're doing, where they're kind of going back to different things that happened in the film and in different kind of styles. In Thor, they had more of not Phoenician, those Greek vase type things. It was with the kind of atmosphere, or not atmosphere, with the style and feel of the movie. They go with a different kind of end screen type thing, end credits thing. So I think that's kind of cool, kind of a recap of what happened in the movie and the characters. But definitely watch the movie. What I'm going to do with the review, I'm going to kind of read off something that I wrote right before the review, right before watching the film, and then I'm going to go into the review, took some notes. I'm probably going to go through the synopsis and kind of just give some points and things that I thought of while watching the film. So if you're going to get into that, that's going to start now, and that's going to have a whole lot of spoilers. Just here in Street Centers where I watched the film, somewhere up there. But yeah, so heading back, so I'll have that up. Bye. Okay, so now into the review. Now remember, this part that I'm going to be reading right now is stuff that I wrote when I was just sitting in the movie theater waiting for the film to start. This was kind of my pre-thoughts and pre-ideas of what I was expecting in the film. Once that is done, I will tell you that, okay, now we're getting into the review. And remember, I hadn't watched the film when I was writing this stuff. So I was talking about how I was expecting the Black Panther following the Thor series, and all the Thor movies I liked from the first one, even the second one, which most people did not like. It had more of a to me it felt like a Star Trek film somehow. It had some Star Trek fantasy type things when they went to like the Dark Elves and stuff. I really liked that storyline. Anyway, so back to this. And they've been doing a better job. Marvel has been doing a better job with the most recent films. Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Thor Ragnarok, then coming into Black Panther. So my expectations for the film were high. As I said in the trailer, I liked what was there. But I hadn't read that many Black Panther comic books. Neither had I read that many Thor comic books. So I didn't think having that much knowledge of the prior material was going to make the film better or worse for me. I thought that would just be able to stand alone on the film. So I knew some general things about the character of Black Panther. I knew about his Dora Milaje, who are the force who support the crown and support the throne of Wakanda, this special female fighting force. So to me, that wasn't a surprise. I know for some people, they saw that in the visual and said, like, oh, this is cool, woman power, blah, blah, blah. But no, for me, that was something known, something I was aware of. I also knew that the Panther title is something passed on. There's been several Black Panthers. It's not just one T'Challa, who's the Black Panther in this film, but some people already knew that a bit because they'd seen the father had died and then passed him on something, but that wasn't really, I think, fleshed out in the previous films, but that's something that I knew about. I also knew that that Black Panther thing is more of a spirit or god of sort, where it comes from this a higher realm that they can touch into. And then this was something that somebody mentioned in one of those previous videos I did about Black Panther. They were talking about how one of the first antagonists of the Black Panther in the comic books was this character called the White Gorilla. And then they said accurately that I doubt Marvel may not want to touch that because of the whole connotations of black people and monkeys and things like that. But I was like, please include this in the sequel. Because as I'd mentioned, I've only seen some of the trailers, hadn't read any of the stuff. I don't understand why people go in and read like synopses of movies before they go in and watch them. I like having as few spoilers as possible. And for me, it helps just avoiding certain places in the internet, avoiding certain spoiler material. So anyway, I was like, please, please include this in the sequel. I was thinking you could have some massive albino character like this. Okay, when he was a kid, he was an albino, then he was kicked out of his tribe, but then he ends up growing up in the woods, raised by silverbacks, and just becomes this huge hulking character, and then he comes back in to take over his village, but then while he's in that village, he ends up killing some Wakandans during this, and then that starts off a thing with the Panther, and then they can include also more spirit and human combos, and you can have more people suited up in the different suits, kind of like the Black Panther, except they're representing their spirit god or their animal god or their totem like that. So now, as you guys may know, if you've watched the film already, and if you haven't watched the film, as I've mentioned before, this is probably one of the few last times I'm going to mention this. This is going to be a very spoiler-heavy rant view. This is what I call them, rant views, because I talk about the story. If you've seen the one I did for, I think, Thor Ragnarok, also the one I did for Star Wars: The Last Jedi, I'll talk about different beats, so the story kind of follow it section by section as it goes, and I'll just occasionally break off into random rants about different things. But anyway, so M'Baku, who was the character, actually ends up challenging him in the first King's Moot or whatever. King's Moot is not King's Moot. I'm mixing in like King's Moot was there was the what's it called? The moot of the what are those tree people in Lord of the Rings. I can't think of their name right now, but that's like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff I need to stop this. Anyway, so this first thing, Baku ends up challenging N'Challa, and then that shows that I didn't know this, that there was actually separate tribes within Wakanda itself, but that kind of makes sense because if you have a country in Africa, there's normally different tribes inside. So Mbaku's tribe was from the white gorilla tribe, so they included that, but they didn't have that in the preview. I guess they showed that scene when they were fighting, but you couldn't tell, like, oh, that's directly that. And I'm sure if you watch one of the people breaking down the trailers, because a lot of channels or people have this where they're like, yeah, we're going to break down and show all the Easter eggs in the trailers. I'm like, no, I just like the visuals. So anyway, that's shown in there. Mbaku is in there, so that is actually the white gorilla character. And I think it'd be pretty cool if they actually bring him in the second part. I don't know what the sequel is going to be like, but I think they'll expand more into the Wakandan universe, and they might be other people. But now another difference is how the suit was obtained. But yeah, anyway, so that character is in there. The illustration that's going to be on screen, that's going to be going on during this video, that's going to be my take on if the white gorilla had his own Black Panther type suit, his own vibranium powered suit. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to put up actual merchandise with this shirt on. I've had some other merchandise taken down because of, what's it called, copyright claims and stuff. But this one, I have not seen another design. I just watched a Black Panther film, and then I did a sketch of this. So maybe it'll be up, maybe not, but that's not too important, just for this video mostly. So this is winding down on the previous things. The last thing I wrote down before getting into the film was I was a little apprehensive about the accents. And you know, this could be more, it could take me out of the film because I've lived in Kenya for a while. Right now I'm in Kenya, and I'm more familiar with people speaking English in African accents and than most who've never been to a sub-Saharan African country. And this is something I kind of equate that if you're British and then you watch like a James Bond film or something, and then, or just any of the films in the United States of America where somebody's speaking a British accent, for you, you might be able to tell more that it's a put on versus somebody who's never really heard native speakers speak that language. Or you might be like, oh, that's a mix of an accent from like Liverpool and from Surrey or from Wales or something, where it's not necessarily like a British accent, it's just a general stuff. So with this one, for me, I was kind of like, okay, that might put me off. But I'm glad to say they did a pretty good job. I mean, it was pretty much as good as any accent I can do, so no. And they did a good job. It's a well-acted film, they did the research, and I think they cast it well. So now let's get into the actual story. So I really enjoyed that opening animatic that they were setting up the story and the history of Wakanda, how the vibranium asteroid hit the ground and it was trapped in that mountain and they started mining it, and how it gave them all these benefits, and then how the different tribes kind of come together. So that was a really good intro. Now in the next scene, we're taken to the 1990s in Oakland. And it's more one of those stereotypical African-American kind of characters where it's like, yeah, this is the hood character, he has guns, he seems to be into some shifty things. I was thinking, yeah, you're going to have like the Black Panther come in through the window or something and show that, yeah, he's actually somehow protecting the neighborhood. But I had forgotten, which is a good setup in this film, is that how they're setting up how Wakanda is actually very isolationist.
So there's a knock on the door, the guns are put away, and then the guy goes up, one of the characters goes up, and this film had excellent setups where they brought something in and then later on in the film there's a payoff for that. And that's what good films do. They kind of have that set up and then they give a call back to that thing, then you get your payoff. So that's a good way to make a film, and that's something I think this film did in an excellent way. So knock on the door, and then we're introduced to the Dora Milaje. Dora Milaje. I will say that name differently. Bear with me. But this one thing I was kind of thinking about, the whole Grace Jones line, like, oh, they're not going to knock again. Just setting up that these are some badass, not to be played with characters, and they come in and they set up, they take you out where this is not just an African American character, this is not your typical hood character. He actually has connections with Wakanda. And then the king comes in, the king at the time, Chaka, of Wakanda comes in, and it's revealed that this character is his brother. So at this point, they talk to each other, personable to begin with. I think it's let to be known that the brother who's outside in the world, who was sent there to spy, sent there to bring information back to Wakanda about what the world was like. And then during this time, Njobu, who is the name of the brother, he ends up getting a wife and getting a kid and getting more involved with the quote-unquote cause. Now, this is just something that's normally referred to as the cause of minorities outside. They don't necessarily speak of a specific group or cause or issue, which is, for those of you who have been watching this channel, you know is one of my frustrations with the lack of the ability to articulate the particular issue. But I do understand this is for a film, this is based off a comic book, and that issue is further gone and discussed even in the case of Wakanda itself in Africa compared to the plight of Africans in general. So it's not necessarily just in the United States of America or the Western world of how blacks and minorities are treated there, but this is part of just setting up the themes of the film. How Wakanda, represented by Chaka in this situation, wants to remain isolationist, and Jobu, the people who have left Wakanda, kind of want to say, why don't we join the world? Why don't we participate more? Why don't we help more with other people outside there? Well, part of what Njobu was doing ended up with having Ulysses Claw, who's an arms dealer, actually end up targeting Wakanda and killed some Wakandans and stole some vibranium. So the king is not pleased, and he's saying, okay, we're going to have to shut this down. You're going to have to come back and receive the proper judgment for what you have done, face justice. And Jobu is not for that. He's kind of trying to fight that, but then it turns out that his right-hand man, who he had trust in also, turns out to be another spy sent out by King Chaka, and then there's also payoff for that later, but I'll get back to that. So, now you get another time skip, and then you're in present-day Wakanda, and then you find the Black Panther, the current Black Panther. This is this is Chala, played by Chadwick Boseman, who is the Black Panther that we've come to know from the other films. And if you have watched those films, you do know that his father died in some attack. I think it was in Civil War, if I'm not mistaken. But now Chala, the Black Panther, is about to undertake this mission, and he's being talked through it by Danya Gurira's character, sorry. She is Okoye, who is the head of the Dora Milaje, and she's kind of giving him tips. Seems like an older sister type character, but you can tell he's kind of deferring to her, at least respecting her level. And one thing I want to say about the Dora Milaje, and a lot of people, I've seen some comments saying like, oh, Black Panther's hero is black women, and seem to be kind of shocked or put aback by this. And you have this narrative in society about how it's a patriarchy and women are held down. Especially, I think, when you talk about sub-Saharan African nations, even North African nations or the Arab nations. And I've mentioned that separately, how I kind of compare this to be like, okay, now people are going to say I'm objectifying, but you use objects to represent something. Let's say you have a G.I. Joe. You have one G.I. Joe that you play with and you've put in the mud and you do all these things. And then you have another G.I. Joe that's a collector's item that you keep in the package, you keep it protected, you never take it out, you just there for display. Which one would you say you value more? Now, I guess you could make an argument that somebody might enjoy playing and that shows more value, but there's a different treatment with it. It's not saying that one or the other is less valuable. One, you're definitely willing to risk more damage to it, and the one you're protecting, putting away in that display thing, it's not there because you don't want it, because you devalue that thing. You're not just throwing it away in the attic, but it's there for display. And I think that's the treatment, how men and women are different, and people are treated in a different way. Another thing is, if you look at history, you look at anthropology, I think that's the field of study of humanity, and you look at matriarchies and they tend to be less technologically advanced, So just going off of that, which is not necessarily proof of anything, but seeing that African nations and some other places in the world that tend to be considered more patriarchies are less technologically advanced than places that aren't, that kind of goes against that whole narrative somewhat. But coming back to the Dora Milaje, this whole strong black women thing is a thing. From my anecdotal experience, matriarchs or mothers or women are put on a state of importance in African communities. Not only do women live longer, but you also see this in African American communities. And I know this is film, this is media, but things like the Big Mama's house trope, where it's like on the Thanksgiving type movies that you'd have, where you'd go to the matriarch's house. And this goes to beyond, because this was movies that were coming out in the 90s, so they were talking about grandparents, and that was before the time when you had this 70% single motherhood rate in the African American community. So this had to be kind of situations where the father understood, I'm going to go out there and work, bring in the money, but the mother is going to be at home taking care of the kids and raising kids and having that level of importance. So they hold the family together. They have their own power. So this whole idea of having the Dora Milaje as a strong fighting force, not that new or unique when you come to African cultures, and I think just the world in general. I think this whole idea that women have been universally or traditionally just held down, I don't think that necessarily happens. It's more of a pendulum, and people are held to different responsibilities and different situations and things depending on where they live and the considerations of the time. One last thing with this is Muammar Gaddafi. If you guys don't know him, he was the leader of Libya. He had his own female fighting force. He even traveled with them. I remember there was a time I think he went to meet the Pope, or the Pope went to Libya or something, and he had his all-female security force actually go out there with him. So this whole traveling around, I don't know, it would be really weird. Gaddafi was president for a long time, so I don't know. It'd be really weird if you found out that Gaddafi got this from the Black Panther storyline, or this Black Panther people, Stan Lee. I can imagine someone like Stan Lee or Jack Kirby that created Black Panther reading that about Gaddafi back in the 80s or whatnot, and then be like, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. Let's have this all-female fighting force. And my oh my, we're still at just the start of this whole review. So anyway, Black Panther goes on this mission, and he's kind of teased like, oh, don't freeze when she shows up. And it turns out that this is a mission of some people that were enslaving some people and some other people. Some people were enslaving some other people, and he goes and frees them, and then he's kind of pointing out that this had to be on the quiet. Wakanda is a hidden place, so occasionally they go out and do some things. But then it turns out he's trying to meet Okoye, and that's the person he was told he's trying to meet the character of Nakia, who's played by Lupita Nyong'o, and that turns out to be his ex-girlfriend they dated before, and he tells her that, yeah, my father died, I'm about to take on the crown, I'm about to go through the crowning ceremony, I'd like you to be there. She agrees, and then it goes back, you meet now the Queen Mother at the time, played by Angela Bassett, and then you meet his sister, played by Letitia Wright, who's Shuri, and then she's like kind of this scientist type character. But it's just good setting up the dynamics between these characters and their friendly relationship and their respect level for each other. And I think that was a really good part about this film, just the personal nature. And one thing some people object with is they feel like they were focusing, at least some people who have talked to me about this have said, I wish they focused more on X, Y, Z. But you have to understand this is supposedly going to be a trilogy. So this is a lot of world building and setting up of characters and locations and things like that. And again, one thing about this universe, about Wakanda, having that whole royalty thing, I think it's good to look at Africa and realize that some countries have, the oldest country is Ghana, at least as a republic, as an independent nation, and that's only about 60-something years old. So you have this situation where I think if you're trying to understand some of the dynamics that occur in Africa, think about the social dynamics and the political dynamics that existed in a place like France after they had let go of monarchies, 60 or something years after they had let go of the monarchy system. So you still have situations where some African leaders still view themselves as kings in their own kingdom, ruling that way, appointing that way, ruling by decree versus by law in that way. And that also happens in the United States of America. We've seen that there's been some administrations doing the similar things. But I think that's just a point to make, that realize that Africa is a much younger place and older. So in an odd way, yeah, the country system, the nation state system is a lot younger than it is in other places. And then that's based off of long-lying histories and traditions and beliefs and ways of doing things that haven't changed since the beginning of humanity since the missing link, etc. So next we move on to this this art gallery, and it was with Michael B. Jordan, who was there playing the character of Eric Killmonger. Michael B. Jordan did an amazing job, and for me, one of the main things to set up in films is setting up a good villain. Setting up a villain that you either care for or dislike in a certain way, but I think villains carry films a lot more than the heroes. Since that's the thing that's going to challenge the viewer, I think. It's going to get them more invested in what's going to happen. Because, yeah, in general, you just want the hero to win. They tend to be the person you jump into and become a part of. But with this situation, it was a really good job by Michael B. Jordan and the creative team of this film. But then in this scene, I just remember thinking, like, how rude is that person drinking coffee? Because I think even if you had some kind of disrespect for the person you're doing there, I think just as a basic professional, you wouldn't be in there drinking coffee while trying to introduce somebody to or talk to somebody about the thing, even if you thought they were a risk to steal the thing or didn't have knowledge of it. But maybe that was part of setting up to show how dismissive that this character was. And then there was a payoff of showing that was actually a poisoned drink. And I like films where these are more like the adult type Marvels where people actually die. There's a lot of deaths in this movie. But so you have the situation where you have this open where Black Panther, T'Challa, ends up foiling people being stolen. And then in this situation, you jump to a situation where you have Eric Killmonger. I guess it's Eric at this point. They don't say his name here, but that's a character's name. They end up showing him actually stealing artifacts. And then the soundtrack continues. Excellent soundtrack in this film. So that's shown. He steals the mask that you're going to see later, the little hyena mask thing. But that's the whole thing, the setup and then payoffs. Why is she drinking coffee? She's drinking coffee because that's poison. And that's one thing in films. Films are kind of good in that way where almost nothing is superfluous. There's very little things that are just put in for no reason. And that's something I kind of appreciate of just a well put together film and just trying to pick up like, okay, why is that there? Is that going to have some kind of payoff? So, back to the kingdom of Wakanda. And now you set up in the thing where where T'Challa, the Black Panther, gets his powers taken away, his superhuman powers that are given to him by this heart-shaped herb. And then he gets the situation where the different tribes that are in Wakanda get to challenge for the throne. And that's kind of cool how it's not just doesn't just remain with one tribe. And then now with that, that's one thing I'm wondering now, is that Black Panther thing, it turns out to be just the Wakandan spirit. So my whole idea of having white gorilla spirit, maybe a lion spirit, then like you have like a rhino spirit if it turns out to be from the tribe of Wakabi, who was played by Daniel Kaluuya. I thought that would be kind of cool, but that might still come in, but that might be too Power Rangers-y for this, but I don't know. I thought it would be cool if that happens. So, back to this. So, in the fight, as I said before, M'Baku comes in from the Jabari tribe, if I'm saying that, Jabari tribe, and those are the white gorillas, so that kind of is an homage or at least a nod to that original villain. So I thought, yeah, that's cool, the white gorilla's into it. But I still think they should have gone with him being albino. I think that would have been a lot cooler. But anyway, the character was played by Winston Duke, and he did a great job. I really liked his character in the film. So he ends up winning in a really hard-fought battle with T'Challa, and I'm kind of thinking like these guys are going to come back and help and save T'Challa somehow in the future. I was pretty sure it was going to happen. Then they go through the whole process. You see T'Challa go through the crowning process, getting his powers back, going into the ancestral plane, and different cultures speak of the same kind of unknown. That's one thing that was kind of cool. I think it was kind of good to see this ancestral plane type thing. And this is one thing that made me realize that with a film like this, it may be similar to someone who watches like Thor. If you had some Scandinavian or some Northern European kind of ancestry, maybe you see Thor and you see it's based off of some kind of mythology from your ancestors, and you might have some extra connection to it. So yes, I think there may be some African Americans there, or there may be some people in Africa who feel, oh, this has some tinges to the kind of ancestry or gods and stuff like that that we have in our mythology. But that's something I want to study more. I want to study more and try to understand what are at least the tribe that I'm from, the Luya tribe, and see, is there actually some kind of pantheon of gods or some kind of set oral tradition that might have been passed on about how that tribe or how those peoples came to be? I'll get back to you if I actually get around to doing that eventually. I'll probably end up throwing that kind of history into my whole carbon project. So there's a line here where they say, it's hard for a good man to be king. And as I mentioned before, I think that's a mentality that a lot of African leaders have, where they have that king mentality. And did someone like Hillary Clinton have a queen mentality? And is Trump really the God Emperor? Do you have to be? Is it hard for a good man to be God Emperor? But anyway, this is another setup for something that's going to happen later on in the film, where maybe the bad guy is going to be king and show you that actually being a bad character makes it easier for you to be the king of a country. But yeah, good setup. Then now you move from the imaginary, technologically advanced African nation, South Korea, go from there, and they go to, which is next to a country in the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea that a lot of people, mostly on the political left, would like to imagine doesn't exist, because that's the socialist paradise, the collectivist type of thing, but it's completely a mess there. I have to mention that. Every time North Korea can be mentioned of how garbage that place is, how terrible the place probably is, it needs to be mentioned. Also, another peoples who don't really talk about North Korea that much in the full light is the race realists. North Korea is more racially homogeneous than any other country in the world. So when you have this film, people are talking about Wakanda like, yeah, look, racial homogeneity. That's what they're talking about in that country. So it's not that bad of a thing when black people do it. Or yeah, you see they're talking about it too. It can actually be positive. But then racial homogeneity in and of itself is also there in North Korea. How is it turning out there? Collectivism, socialism is there in North Korea. How is it turning out there? Anyway, just wanted to mention that. So another small thing is wigs are a disgrace. I really like how Okoye's character was like, how do I have to put this on my head? And I do wonder more so with African American women, and maybe because it sticks out more with African American women, since they're not really putting on afros of wigs. First of all, the whole cultural appropriation aspect of it. Are you culturally appropriating white people's hairstyles by doing it? But I thought that was a good kind of call out there. And I think this is kind of a situation where a lot of women do it, but don't really like the feel of it, yet they still do it. You know, some people say, oh, we wear heels because we have to for some kind of reasons, but we don't like how they feel. Stop wearing wigs, rock your hair, shave your head, do something else. In my opinion, in my suggestion, I think you should do that. But moving on. So now we meet this CIA agent that was played by, what's his name? He was in Lord of the Rings, by Martin Freeman. He was also in the Sherlock show. And it just reminded me that British people do really decent, passable American accents. Now, this could be partially because they're speaking English. An American accent is kind of, not a bastardization, or it's a derivative of the language that the accent was made for. So if you're originally speaking the language that's supposed to be spoken for, then you can kind of change it a little bit, tweak it a little bit to do the language that is trying to speak the language that you are originally speaking the accent of. And that makes any sense. And this whole scene that happened, this whole gambling scene where there's all this battle, great scene. It was a long shot scene, jumping from different places to places, cameras swooping around, following weapons, following different fight scenes, going through fight scenes. Excellent scene, very exciting. I was kind of wondering, is that the same scene that was used, same location that was used in Kill Bill when Gogo Yubari was fighting the bride, fighting Uma Thurman's character? I don't know. Might check. Not really that important actually to the film or this review. Another unimportant thing, but this is a rant review, and I did warn you that I jump around all over the place, was after this whole battle and the whole scene where there's a chase scene where cars are being blown up, people are running through buildings, explosions, all this kind of things. I was kind of wondering, at least some of you may wonder, what happens after these things, all the damage that's caused in some of these things. Like, they touched upon this, I think, in the Batman v Superman thing, where it's just the aftermath of Superman's fight in the Man of Steel Part 2 or something, where he was fighting the Kryptonians, how many people die and things like that. But there actually is a rather interesting comic book. I think it might be called The Wrecking Crew or something else, where it follows a few superheroes, a few superhumans who join this company that actually goes in and cleans up after metahuman occasions. So if there's a huge battle or something, because Superman doesn't normally go back and put the buildings back up, so who would actually go in? So I thought that was a pretty cool comic book. If you guys are interested in comic books or have been wondering about that storyline, go online, do an internet search, find that comic book, and you can probably check that out and get some stories towards that. I think that would be a really cool Netflix kind of show too, that type of show where you could just have these people showing basic powers, this slice of life type storyline, and then you can have occasional cameos by actual big time superheroes, or maybe they're just flying off in the back somewhere, or they send them a bill for something, or yeah, etc., etc. So after this whole scene, I think you go back to that callback where it's hard to be a good man and to be king. Chala is heated up and he wants to like completely kill that guy, that Ulysses Claw character, but he ends up deciding, no, I'm going to stop. You know, they're like, okay, these people are taking photos, and it goes back to that whole thing. Do Asians take as many photos in Asia as they do with their tourists, or is that just more of a touristy thing? But it's just the whole typical Asian touristy type thing, taking photos of everything. I think anybody would do that if there was a situation where there's like some superhuman battle. But anyway, he holds back and he listens and say, yes, these people are filming. I can't just kill him here. So the CIA and people also were trying to get this thing to catch him as well. So they end up taking him to this kind of safe house place. And then they have this really cool scene again in that whole setup place. But one thing I'd like to point out about this thing is it's really not a cool thing to speak other languages in front of somebody. One thing that's happened with the tribal language here at Kaluuya, I don't necessarily understand the language. I understand some words here and there, but I can pretty much tell if somebody's speaking about me, around me, in a different language, just from the tone and from the way they carry themselves. So I think it's kind of rude to do and not really the best thing to do. And then there's a part here with more social commentary, just how Okoye speaks about Americans kind of in a dismissal sense, or just like, oh, Americans. They have to also understand that now other parts, Americans themselves, is a growing group of Americans in the world who are saying the same thing about other people in the world. Yet when they're doing it, I think it's being looked on as more of a harmful, or more racist kind of light, where it's like, oh, why are you speaking about other countries in the world that way? Yet for a long time, people have been very dismissive of Americans. I remember being in Rome, and occasionally people would run around. We'd have some times we'd be out kind of partying late. And in the historical center, it's like places where you can go to clubs and bars and things like that, right above places where people live with their families. So occasionally to be late at night, people were like, shut up, like, be quiet, you Americans. And then we'd be like, sono canadese. We'd be like, we're Canadian. It's kind of this thing. Americans have this rap. Other countries have a certain rap. This is a thing that happens. We speak in generalizations. I think people need to get over it a little more. Or stop using them, and then everybody stop using them. So in this scene, after the whole interrogation thing, Eric Killmonger and his crew end up coming and busting out Claw. So in this whole scene, Killmonger is just completely hardcore. He's, yeah, I'm going to kill everybody. I really liked how just badass he was, and then it made sense later on when he had been introduced that he was actually a Black Ops character. He was actually somebody trained by the CIA to just go in and just completely decimate places, and just, he was just hardcore. Killmonger, that was his nickname given because he just kept racking up kills. Then later on he has that whole thing where he's like, all the scars that I put on because what's it called? He says he wants to go to Wakanda, and then Claw's character is like, no, don't go to Wakanda. This is what they do. And they showed the scar that he had on his neck. And then Killmonger's like, look, I've done all this scarification. Every single bump that he had on his body was from killing somebody, was putting a body down. Which is hardcore. I mean, they set up a really badass character, and he was carried out in a really just no BS type of way. And then he goes on and he just kills people. He kills Killmonger, he kills his partner because she got caught. Like, he's just a no BS guy. He's got, his mind is focused on what he wants to do, and he just gets at it, and he's really good at what he does, and he was just a freight train going through this film, and I think he really did a great job. So, I think that was also setting up that, hey, he finally killed Claw. He finally ends up getting him back to Wakanda. Yet previous kings have tried doing this. So maybe being a bad man actually is the way you do the kingly things that need to be done. So Agent Ross had gotten injured while saving Nakia, and then they end up deciding, okay, we're going to take him back to Wakanda. And that's the thing that sets up more tension in this situation. It sets up more of a split between Wakabi and Chala, because he had promised Wakabi that he's going to bring him dead or alive. You know, he's going to bring him back. And instead of doing that, not only does he fail at bringing that character back, he actually breaks more rules by bringing in a foreigner who's actually a spy, who's actually going to go out and tell the rest of the world about it. So things seem to be falling apart, and the storyline is just continuing to be very exciting. I remember I didn't really feel there was even one lull in this film. It was just like one scene onto the next and just building up, building up, building up, which all made for a really entertaining film. So the CIA agent is back in the lab. It's the main lab, and he's getting his cervix or one of his vertebrae fixed and things like that. Then he ends up getting up. And one thing in here, I don't understand why Shuri doesn't understand that he's up if there's not some kind of notification thing. Maybe because there's just always Wakandans in there, so there's no need to be notified. There's no need to be aware too much of who's in the lab since you kind of know who's in the lab. But it ends up for a funny scene when the kind of agent gets up and Agent Ross gets up and kind of gets her attention, and she's like, "Don't scare me like that, colonizer." That got a laugh out of me. Some people who were in the movie theater with me also had a chuckle. So then you have a part where Agent Ross and Shuri are starting to talk, and she's doing more exposition, talking about how the maglev works and how it shuts down the volatile qualities of vibranium when they're traveling at that speed. And that's another setup that has a payoff later on in the film. So this film keeps having that. So they finally mention that Eric Killmonger is actually at the border. He's actually been found. He's actually in Wakanda now. And then he says, "Oh, he's one of us." And then when I first heard that, I was like, does he mean one of us as in the CIA or one of us as in American? But also, Eric Killmonger, I think, was a surrogate for African Americans or for the African diaspora. That whole, like, how do Africans and African Americans, mostly black people, what's the reaction or treatment within the different cultures and how they see each other with their struggle and abilities. So, there's another thing on the side here, something about the military. There was another comment in one of the videos that I did, in the last Black Panther video that I did. Somebody was talking about white nation and white nationalism, how the Americans, I don't know if they were trolling, because I was trolling in that video, so maybe some people were trolling me, and some of them I could tell. But anyway, this guy was talking about how we have 150 million armed people. We have the military ready. First of all, the 150 million armed people. How many people are actually adults with guns? How many people are really old people? How many people are kids? How many people on the political left that wouldn't rise up in this white nation type of thing that people are talking about with this ethno-state thing? So on top of that, they're talking about the military. And I think this is one thing about the US military. It's one of the most racially, ethnically, culturally diverse fighting forces in the world. And like that thing, Band of Brothers type thing, where they had more separation, where they said, okay, it was a lot better to put people in World War I and II, I think, mostly in World War II, in the regions they're from. You know, they used to have like, okay, these are the people from the Bronx, these are the people from Indiana, and then they would have some kind of camaraderie that way. But when it goes higher than that, they become brothers. There's a certain brotherhood in the military. So to have this idea that people in the military will all of a sudden just go back to their racial lines if there was this race war, impending race war that people think is coming, some people say is coming, I don't think it's that accurate. I think the bonds that they build through that are a lot stronger than people realize. And that's the thing. You go through certain struggles, you go through certain challenges, you try to aim for certain things, and you realize by actually working together, we actually solve things and we both have each other's back. And I think that's how family is built. Just how when you marry somebody, they're not your direct relation, but you do build a family with that person from the shared struggles and from the like kind of results and goals that you guys have. So back to the film. We're now in the throne room, and King T'Challa is there with the other heads of chiefs or heads of the other tribes. And Eric Killmonger's character comes in and he starts confronting them and says, look, I brought Claw back and you guys failed to do this. Then he kind of sets up, and then finally it's admitted that he is the son of the brother. So he has some claim to the throne, and he actually calls T'Challa out and says, I challenge you to the throne. And he doesn't have to take it, but T'Challa decides to say yes, because T'Challa himself has a lot of guilt in realizing how this came to be, in realizing that, yes, his father actually killed his uncle and didn't come back and tell them, and he has a lot of guilt with that. And he also feels for Eric Killmonger's plight himself, because he's been questioned also about keeping away and not helping the people on the outside. So there's that whole questioning of that whole narrative. Is it really positive to be an ethno-state? Is isolationism really something that should be held as a high standard? Should they really come out and join the rest of the world? So that is something that's carried on throughout this film, and that is a point here where I think it comes to a boil, and then they decide to have the fight. Now, when they get to the actual fight, Eric Badass Killmonger goes out and does lay into T'Challa and ends up shaming him down and then throwing him over the waterfall. And he was pretty dead, and it's just the whole kind of thing where I'm just like, in any of these things, I know it's not just because it's Black Panther, but even because it's just a different film, if you don't see like the dead body completely dead at the time, the person isn't dead. Just know this about certain things. But another payoff here, which I didn't really expect to be there, is it's finally shown that in the start of the movie, the character of Zuri, who was revealed to be the other spy that had been sent to spy on Jobu, who was Chaka's brother, which is Chala's dad, was sent out to spy on the West, or spy on the rest of the world, and then he ended up getting involved with Claw. And then Zuri was also sent out to spy on Jobu. And then it turns out Zuri is actually the character played by Forrest Whitaker, who I didn't really put those two and two together. Maybe I just didn't pick up his name in the start. But he reveals that it actually turns out that Anjobu actually tried to kill the king, or tried to kill Zuri for betraying him. And then the king jumped in and killed him and saved Zuri's character. And Zuri has always held that to him. He's held that guilt and held it as a secret, and this slowly by slowly was revealed by first Chala seeing Killmonger having the ring that was similar to his father's ring or his grandfather's ring. So his grandfather, I guess, had given his two sons two different rings, and then that had been passed down to him, and then Killmonger still had his. So Chala himself also had a sense of justice and said, okay, I do have to honor his actual right to the throne and battle him. And he did expect to win. It's not like he was doing it like, oh, I'm just going to throw this fight and let Killmonger take it up. But no, he still does end up losing. But also another cool thing was the actor who played a young Zuri, who played a young Forrest Whitaker's character in the real world, and actually is Forrest Whitaker's son. So adding to the technology that people can de-age people, you also have situations now where people can remain to be actors within families and carry on and pass on their family kind of thing. So it's kind of cool seeing that still going on, because this kind of thing is how the world used to work. People would be like, I'm good at this, I'm going to teach my kids to be good at this too, and then they go on. Sometimes it's an actor, sometimes it's the presidency of a nation. But so you have a situation where they have that battle. Zuri tries to sacrifice himself and say like, okay, just kill me instead. He ends up killing him anyway, but he still wants to kill Chala. Throws Chala off the waterfall, and then Ramonda, who's the Queen Mother at that time, who's Chala's mother, she ends up escaping with Nakia, and then Nakia goes through this process where she goes in and actually steals one of the heart-shaped herbs because Eric Killmonger wants to burn everything down, destroy everything, and then he has his own exposition where he goes to a different plane. So this whole ancestral plane thing, I don't know if it takes you to a certain location or if it takes you to a certain location within yourself. Because for him, instead of going to this planes where the other Black Panther, other people who held the title of Black Panther, their spirits are held, he goes to a separate place. It is that same apartment where his dad died, and they have a moment together. So I don't know if he could ever actually access the actual planes with the rest of the kings and queens and things like that. But anyway, Killmonger comes back in, takes the throne, gets the second Goldie suit that had been introduced before, because the sister Shuri had made two different suits. So again, that's a setup before, and then the payoff later, where it's like, oh, we're not going to see what the other suit does. No, we're going to see what the other suit does. Which suit did you guys prefer? I think that gold suit was kind of cool, and that was more towards like the Black Panther realistic, I want to say realistic, but how, as I'd mentioned, a Black Panther is actually just a leopard or a cat in the Panthro family, or whatever kind of genus, kingdom, phylum you want to put it in, that has a different coloring, a different coating on a different coloring on the fur that makes it seem black. There's not like an individual genus or strain or species of creature called a Black Panther. How you have like lynxes, you have bobcats, you have tigers that are separate. There's no just like this is entirely Black Panthers that are only going to have kids that are Black Panthers. It's more of a strain. And they might get to a point where there actually is one. And this is kind of the thing where people talk about animals going extinct and about human beings causing things to go extinct. And I know that happens in some cases. But look at dogs. Look at all the different kinds of dogs that exist. All those species of dogs, the different dogs that exist. I think it's called species. All the breeds, all the different breeds of dogs that exist. That is thanks to human intervention. So yes, humans do destroy certain things, but they also create certain things. And a lot of people out there love their Shih Tzu, love their Bulldog, love their Irish Sheephound or whatever. You have to realize that if they weren't for humans going in and doing what humans do, improving on nature, adjusting nature to their life and their needs, you wouldn't have these dogs and things that you love so much right now. So one thing to think of when you're talking about how much humans suck. Anyway, Team Human, best team, best life form. So now, but who is the best king? So back to Eric Killmonger. He's going on this whole, we're sending troops out, we're sending weapons out, we're going to arm people around the world. And then Agent Ross has met up with Nakia and Ramonda, and they're trying to they're trying to escape the country, or at least stop this whole military attack. And to do that, they go to the Jabari tribe in the mountains. That's a white gorilla tribe. They try to talk to Njobu? Sorry, what was his name again? Yes, no, not Njobu. Njobu was the brother. What's that guy's name again? Mbaku. They tried to talk to Mbaku, and it turns out that Mbaku hears what they're saying, and then he's actually found Chala. And this was a lot more realistic a way of getting Chala back in the story instead of him going to, like, tapping into the higher plane and finding himself back. But some people found his body, took him up to some people from the Jabari tribe found his body, some fishermen, and then they took him up there, and then he was kind of holding him there. And then since Nakia happened to have the heart-shaped herb, they do the whole process to get him back, and he technically has not lost the battle, since it's supposed to be to death or to him saying he gives up. And he did neither. He didn't die, he didn't say he gave up. So he takes back in the spirit. He has a confrontation with his father, talking about what's happening, why did you do this, why did you kill your brother? But he was just saying the reason he did this was because he was doing it for Wakanda. Wakanda was above his family, was above everything. Now that's the question that now Chala is going to have to take. His ex-girlfriend, character of Nakia, she was an activist. She wanted to go out and help the world. Eric Killmonger wants to go out and be part of the world in a different way. His sister as well, Shuri, she wants to be part of the world and share certain things about it in different ways. So a lot of people were on that and telling him, maybe we should do this. And then even Wakabi was like, let's go out and be more active. And with Wakabi, he jumps in with Killmonger, falls in line, and is like, yes, let's go out there and raise the world and show them how formidable Wakanda is. So now we're at this point where we're set up where the Black Panther is back, King T'Challa is back, and then King Killmonger is also on the throne. So you have this battle of kings now. So now T'Challa is back, he's revived, they have this moment in the throne room, and then Baku comes in and he's like, are you guys done? Which I think was a really good nod, because I often wonder in these films and kind of situations where I'm like, when somebody's having a moment, or some group of people are having a moment, what is everybody else doing? Just standing by, twiddling their thumbs? So it kind of shows that whole frustration that some people might feel. And then he goes on the whole barking thing, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to feed you to my kids, to Agent Ross. And then of course, another article came out where it's like black people should start barking at white people when they speak out of turn. And I don't know if they're joking, I don't know if this is a poe, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody was seriously suggesting that, even if it was just a little lightly. But anyway, not going to even leave a link to that article. Just wanted to mention it. Now he mentions the whole like, well, I'm kidding, we're vegetarians. And yes, I know a lot of vegans often say like you don't have to eat meat to be a bodybuilder because like things like gorillas, but that's an entirely different animal. Hippos are also vegetarians, and are hippos vegetarians? I think they are, but they're also obese, kind of obese. And they're obese, they have a lot of fat, but different animals live in different ways, have different dietary needs. So they end up going and saying, we're going to actually have to battle and get the throne back. We need to stop Eric Killmonger from arming the rest of the world, taking out vibranium weapons out there. We need to keep this isolationist thing going in some extent. But, M'Baku says, no, I'm going to stay up here. And at this point, I'm still thinking he's still going to help. Because earlier on, I was like, okay, with that fight at the start, he's going to come back and end up saving T'Challa in some way. But in this situation, he says, no, I'm going to stay here with my people. We've always been safe here. And they could have gone one or two ways with this. He could have just helped, like I thought he was going to, that he ended up doing. Or if he had stayed back, I think that would have been an extra thing to that whole tribalist nature of a lot of African nations. And now that we see other countries in the world, they define tribe not necessarily on a genetic level, maybe even a genetic level, but not just on a racial-based level, in different ways. But anyway, so that whole tribal thing where one tribe, like, I'm not going to help that tribe no matter what. I know we're in the same country, I know we're in the same nation, we may be threatened by a similar thing, but as long as my tribe is okay, I'm not going to help you. And there is that in African politics. So if they had gone with that kind of angle, I would have kind of understood it too. And it could have been an extra nod to the actual realities of living in a sub-Saharan African nation. Or as I mentioned, just keeping on this divisions that you have in the United States of America, where it's becoming ever more polarized, where you have people saying, there's no way I'm going to cross the aisle, there's no way we're even going to sit down at the table and discuss these topics. It has nothing to do with me. As long as my people are okay, I'm going to be good. So now this goes back to the fight scene. Now you go out and some of the planes have been launched out. Then the Black Panther shows up. Shuri and Nakai are doing their own little end run onto getting to the location. And then Killmonger has the Dora Milaje, has the tribe, has, what's it called? Has Wakabi's tribe. And they're the ones who are supporting him. They're the ones backing this whole let's take over the world thing. And there's a scene where the plane gets knocked down or something, and then the Black Panther comes out, and it's the suit and the reveal. That Black Panther suit was fire. Just the visuals in this film were amazing. I mean, it got me really hyped. Really liked the Black Panther suit, the look of it, when he comes out onto the wreckage, and then the whole confrontation thing. Really cool visuals, and just getting this whole thing set up. So now people break up. The Dora Milaje finally see that, the Dora Milaje, they see that yes, the fight, the Kingsmoot, not the Kingsmoot, and those things are called Ents. Those three creatures are called Ents. And that Kingsmoot was when they sat down and talked together and then they planned. So that whole battle of finding out who's king was still on because, as Chala says, he did not die and he did not say he gives up. So Eric Killmonger is like, no, get that noise. Like, I'm the king. Like, attack him. Some people decide to do it. The Dora Milaje peel off and they say, actually, he's actually right. They were already objecting to some of the things that he was doing. So they'd end up being on Chala's side. And technically, they just revert to the original king that was there before. They're going more by the law of the land. Well, whereas, what's it called? The Wakabi's tribe, he wants to go to the future and do this new thing. So he kind of goes onto that side. Then you have this whole fight scene, massive fight scene in different situations. Agent Ross is working with Shuri, and then they go in and they take control of one of the jets, the main jet that Black Panther is using, from technology that had been shown before when she took control of a vehicle that was in South Korea for the car chase. She took control of the vehicle from Wakanda, so it can show that technology is already there. And that's what I was saying. With any film, you have a setup and you have payoffs later. So that normally happens in films, and you had a lot of that in this. So this fight scene, they end up fighting, they end up getting in the battle. The rhinos come in, these massive rhinos, massive armored rhinos, come in. They turn the tide of the battle. Seems like it's going to be lost. Then finally the Jabari tribe with M'Baku come in, and then they turn the... And then there's a scene where Wakabi gets on his main rhino, and he looks like he's finally going to ride down Jobu. And then you have the character of Okoye come out and step in front of the rhino, and the rhino just stops still and kind of licks her, like sniffs her and licks her. Because as it was set up before, Okoye and Wakabi, I think they were still dating at this time, or they may have even been married. They had a relationship. But the rhino knows Okoye and doesn't want to attack her. Then Wakabi gets off the rhino, and then they have a confrontation with Okoye. And then she asks, like, would you pick the country over me, or would you pick the throne over me? She doesn't even really seem to give any pause to it. Like, she is a soldier. That's what she does. She is a Dora Milaje above everything else. Dora Milaje above everything else. Puts up his spear at his... Points his spear at him, and then he gives up, puts his weapon down, and the rest of his troops put their weapons down too. And then now we go back to the final battle, finishing up with Black Panther, Chala, versus the other Black Panther, Eric Killmonger, and they're fighting in the vibranium mines, on the train, so going on and off of having their suits activated, their suits deactivated, going through that whole fight scene, and then Chala ends up winning. At the same time, Agent Ross ends up shooting down the last ship that was delivering the weapons outside of Wakanda, and that ties it down, and then there's a good moment where Killmonger finally gets to see this beautiful sunset or sunrise, the sunset in Wakanda that had been talked about before. It's kind of sunsetting on the film, sunsetting on the story and all this. And you have a nice tie-in where he finally decides, like, no, I'm not going to go to jail, I'm not going to go that, I'm going to die as I lived, I guess. And I guess he pulls out the spear that was lodged in his side and apparently dies. And again, no body, no death. So he could come back, but I think they're going to have him kind of dead and gone. But we'll see what happens with that. So, isn't that pretty much it for the film? The last couple of scenes, you finally finish up. Chala gets the kingdom back. He decides to listen to Nakia and his sister, and more to Nakia, who had been like, let's do some more outreach things. They have more outreach centers. They go out to Oakland, that same location that Jobu had died, that opened up the film where his father killed his brother, killed his uncle. So he ends up buying out a lot of the land there, and he says, we're going to have an outreach center here. And then he reveals the ship that was there hidden before. And you kind of have a good way of tying in the story, starting off with the kids who had seen the ship fly off and the kids that were playing basketball there, and now they see the ship come in the daytime. You have the night in the start with death, then you have now with revealing something with the daytime, with the light. Good way of tying it in. And one of the really good things I liked was, in the end, the one kid who kind of had noticed this ship, instead of running to the ship, and another small thing, some of the kids were like, yeah, let's break some parts out of this and go like sell it off. Because that's how it is in the hood sometimes. That's how it is here in Kenya. You park a certain car in a certain location and you don't keep in touch with it. You don't like watch it. People will steal like this side view mirrors, like little like lights from the side, because they'll just go out and sell those things for extra money. Or they'll steal the antenna. Someone ripped out the antenna out of my parents' car. Just straight ripped it out, and they're just going to go sell it for scrap, I guess. Anyway, so you have a situation where that happens, and then one kid comes up to him, and this is how the film ends, and asks Chala, after his sister has run off to the vehicle to talk to them about what's happening at the car, or the ship, and the kid asks him, who are you? Is that yours? He said, who are you? And then Chala kind of just looks off to the side, looks to the camera, and it just cuts off. So I really like that because, as I mentioned in the last video, I was talking about, which video? I was talking about this in the previous video, where I said, I like how they end up with this because they ask, who are you? And then, who is he? Is he Chala? Is he the king of Wakanda? Is he a superhero? Is he just the owner of this ship? Is he just, who is he? He can be so much to so many different people. He also is so many things to so many different people. And this kid was more interested in who the person is. And I think that leaves it open to also the people viewing. Who are you? When you're being asked, who are you as a person? Are you your actions? Are you what people think you are? Are you what you do? So that was a good way to end it, asking the people who are watching, who exactly are you? And then that's also a lot of the people who are watching this film. Who are you in the film? Who are you relating to in the film? What part of this film appeal to you? Is this an alt-right film? Is this for ethno-nationalists, ethno-statists, and things like that? Is this for the black cause? Is this for minority causes, fighting against the man? Who are you in this film? Who are you in your life? So that's it for the review of the film. There's some parts that I missed, but I think I went through pretty thoroughly on the film. There's a few things now I'm going to mention and talk that I saw in the film with themes and things like that, and then end this up. But really, thanks a lot for watching. Let me know what you guys thought about the film, what you thought about this review, also what you think about the little drawing that's been going on the screen. Okay, so what do you guys think the themes were in this film, the main themes? There were the political themes out there, but I'm looking at more at the personal there. They had the strong women in that situation, the Dora Milaje. They had Dora Milaje. They had Ramonda, the Queen Mother. She was a strong character in this. They had the sister Shuri. She was the technological person behind a lot of this. But I think one really positive thing I saw about this film was the dealing with masculinity, especially fatherhood. The relationship that Chala had with his dad, seeing that, oh, I found out my dad did certain bad things in my life that I don't really think were indicative of the man that I thought he was, and made them question who he was going to be and make him wonder if he was good enough to actually be like his father, and then realize that he can actually not really go past the father, but be a different man in and of himself. And that whole situation of the father saying that a father has failed at his job if he can't raise his kids to be independent. And that's paraphrasing, but I think that's a very key thing as a parent, to raise your children to be independent and not really reliant on these exterior forces. And I think when you look at the state as a parent, when you take that on in these welfare kind of state environments, you have a situation where that state does not want a child to grow up. They want someone subservient. They're like a farmer. A farmer doesn't raise its cow so its cow can go out and live on its own, but a parent does do that. And I think that is very lacking in certain communities when parenthood and families are breaking down. Now, on the other side, you have the relationship with Eric Killmonger and his father. I think it shows that Eric Killmonger was somewhat aware of the negative things that his father was doing, but he was buying into why that was being done, and that led him into his path of violence, into his path of revenge, and trying to get these things back. And that kind of shows how, like, with a lack of a father, you can be led to these violent kind of ways. and be led astray in different ways. And I think that was a good thing that was shown through that character. Another thing was the politics of the situation. There's a part when Killmonger's like, oh, where were you Africans? Where was Wakanda when we were dying and we were struggling outside in the rest of the world? And then people can say, like, yes, where is the rest of the world? The African Americans, minorities are struggling. How come no one is helping us? How come the Africans don't care? But then later on, he says something, just soon after that, there's something about how he says, oh, but we're all Africans because all people came from Africa. Then why is he focusing on the plight of just a certain group of people in Africa? Why are activists right now saying, oh, minorities, this and that, when if you look globally, white people are actually the smallest minority group? I mean, it's still like 1 point something billion people that are considered white, I'd say, in this kind of chart that I saw. But still, Asia itself, China itself has 1/3 of the population of the world. I think when you look at Negroes, when you look at Africans in that sense, I think that's about almost 1.5 billion or something. So anyway, when you look at it that way, global minorities, who actually is a minority, where do we all come from? Now, if you buy into what Killmonger is saying about them needing to go out and be more socialist and send their goods out to other countries, be more open to other countries, get into the battles and supporting other countries in other places, and you say, yes, that's what we need to do, we need to unite in that way. Then it turns out that the CIA guy, Agent Ross, is like, hey, we trained him to do that. Why does he do that? Because that's how you destroy countries. Then it turns out that maybe Killmonger isn't actually just taking over Wakanda because he thinks it's a positive thing to do this, to go out and be more part of the world. He's doing it because he knows it's going to destroy Wakanda, like he's destroyed the other countries that he's been deployed at. So it's kind of like a bait and switch. You get in there and you think, yes, let's socialize it, let's open borderize this place, and no, that actually ends up being euthanasia to the country. So that's kind of making people question, how exactly do you want to socialize these things? How exactly do you want to open your borders? You don't just do it just openly in any certain way. There's certain specific ways where if you do it, it's positive, like this outreach center. And if you do it in the other way where you have the, what's it called? Where you have this military goods going out in that kind of way, which part of American foreign policy is that, of sending a lot of military goods and weaponry to certain countries that they don't have social outreach programs with. Like the relationship that, for example, United States of America has with Saudi Arabia is mostly in military and oil. They don't really have like big like social centers of Americanism or Western kind of culture there. Although Saudi Arabia is reaching out to the rest of the world and setting up madrasas and churches and mosques and things like that. So yeah, there's something to think about and something that was noted. One last thing also was I think it was really good. It was like a small thing, but to me it kind of stuck out. Maybe because I've heard about this more and actually maybe been closer to it. But in the opening scene, when I think he was fighting some Nigerian slavers, and even the fact that they used Nigerians, they went out and they were freeing some women that had been taken by these warlords, by these criminals out there. That who Black Panther was freeing. That's who Nakia had snuck in with. And then there was one boy who Nakia says, no, leave him. He was actually conscripted. And that's one thing to remember with a lot of these battles that are going on in the third world, of people saying, oh, the girls were taken. I think just recently, as I'm recording this, a few weeks ago or something, some more girls were taken in Nigeria that have disappeared from a school. But something that happens even more frequently, or at least just as much, that is definitely not reported anywhere close to as much as the other story, is that boys are conscripted into these militaries to serve and to enslave and to harm other people. So I think it was a good shout out for them to include that, to show that yes, this boy had actually been taken in against his will, and he should also be worth saving and worth pointing out. So that's it for this film. Thanks a lot for listening to this. I hope you guys enjoyed the film. I hope you guys enjoyed the drawing. I know this is a little long, but there's a lot to talk about in this. And till next review, I think I'm going to review Valerian next. I wrote down a short review of Valerian and the World of 1,000 Suns, or 1,000 countries, or 1,000 planets, sorry. Valerian and the World of 1,000 Planets. I really like that film. That one's probably going to be shorter than this, but there was some characters in there, their styling, if you guys have seen that film, that are based more of like the Maasai tribe, similar to how the Dora Milaje were outfitted. And there is something about that, like noble savage type thing. And I think that whole Maasai type African tribal look is something that's actually carried over to a lot of different things. I'm not saying it's cultural appropriation, but it's this cultural borrowing because it's a very unique and impressive kind of look. Oh, and one more thing on that. So that other thing I want to talk about that is you actually do see that here in Kenya, where you'll find Maasais or other people living in their tribal homes, like a mud hut, but inside there'll be technology. They're getting the rural electrification thing done, so now finally in the village areas, in the upcountry areas, in those rural areas, electricity is coming there, but you'll get situations where it's still the older type of buildings with that. And you see that in the United States of America too. You'll have people who live in trailers and things like that. They could technically move into like a brick house, but they'll have a trailer with all kinds of technology and things inside. But yeah, that's just something that I've kind of noted and kind of reminded me about places that I've seen here in Kenya. So as you can see, I got one of the illustrations taken into Illustrator and vectored out. I'll let you guys know when the rest of them are up for merchandise. I don't know if I'll do a speed drawing for the rest of them, but yeah, that's it for the video. There's other merchandise in the store that you guys can purchase. Till next video, goodbye.